the world of men was in a state of ruin. The collapse of the environment had taken its toll, and those that survived were reduced to small, rough settlements huddled around the meager resources that remained. Many of the larger villages were ruled by ruthless and unscrupulous warlords who hoarded the best for themselves, leaving the dregs for the rest of the desperate inhabitants. Some even forced other settlements in the same area to pay tribute to them for living on their land. Just when the situation became unbearable for the majority, the people observed the emergence of a new race of beings. They looked human, but were tall and slender, and the clothes they wore made them look otherworldly. At first, no one knew where they came from, but then reports came in of huge vessels landing in the remotest of areas, ships that seemed to come from outer space. The idea of space travel had long been forgotten, having been reduced to the subject of children's books and fantasy. So when these folk landed their ships, it was a new and somewhat frightening experience for those who witnessed it. Others appeared from what was left of the icy forests of the lands once called Northern Europe, Canada, and Northern Asia. These looked similar to the other visitors, but were dressed in garments that seemed to have come from ages past, even from medieval and classical times. Others hailed from the now deserted regions of Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland, where human habitation had always been somewhat perilous at the best of times. The warlords tried to claim that these beings were invaders looking to take over the world, one that was virtually in ruins anyway, and tried to rally their subjects to rid their dominion of these so-called intruders. But the majority of the people saw them as possible saviors, especially when it was discovered that they were the legendary and long-forgotten elves. Once held in high regard, and in some cultures considered to be a little lower than the gods themselves, these folk had been vilified and accused of being demons since Christianity had taken the place of the old faiths. Then came the persecution. Sanctioned by the church and financed by the aristocracy, people began to hunt the elves. They left only the young alive, later to be forced into marriage to wealthy humans so that their offspring would be part human. The adults, male and female, were slaughtered like wild animals, their villages reduced to burnt-out rubble. As it became clear that their people would not survive, the elfin clergy sought counsel from their deities. They were instructed to build circular gates with runes carved into them. These would act as portals to other worlds, safer and more hospitable than the hell that Earth had become. One such world was the legendary Alfheimr, spoken of in ancient Norse folklore. Those that chose to remain fled deeper and deeper into the wilderness. Some made the perilous voyage to the as-yet unexplored lands later known as Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland, where they made their homes in deep caverns, far from any human interference. In the former, they became known as the Huldufolk, or hidden people, and were at least respected. There is even some evidence of them traveling as far as the present-day USA, namely in the legend of the moon-eyed people spoken of in Cherokee legend. Like those that lived in Iceland, these largely nocturnal people lived in caves, were short in stature, and had large, dark blue eyes. They inhabited North Carolina before being driven out by the Cherokee and Choctaw tribes. Among these refugees were many of the half-elves, the product of forced marriages between human and elf. Regardless of their place of refuge, most elf kind were united by a single desire: to return to the lands from which they had been exiled in the past. They watched and waited as humankind's empire first thrived before it was given over to greed, self-centeredness, and corruption. Everything had its price, even the very environment that had sustained this race, along with the millions of species that once roamed the earth for millennia. But mankind did not care to look into the future, and eventually paid the price for their short-sightedness. The world that they so fragrantly abused could no longer sustain them. Their resources ran out, and even then all this pitiful race could think about was its own well-being. Wars and skirmishes were fought, not over national boundaries or differences in religious beliefs, but over arable land, water supplies, livestock, and even minerals. Mankind became more and more fragmented, scattered, and almost without hope of redemption. It was then that the elves saw that the time had come to return, not only to reclaim the land as their own, but to begin the slow process of reviving it using both the advanced technology they had developed, as well as the age-old wisdom and knowledge that was in their blood. This they would achieve with the help of the humans who were willing to work with them, and despite those who would not. Thus began Project Regenesis, the long and arduous task of repairing the damage caused by hundreds of years of human mismanagement and abuse. In a secret location, somewhere deep in a cave system known only to the Earth Elves, was a massive vault. It contained DNA samples of millions of animals, fish, birds, and even insects, most of which had long become extinct. There were also countless seeds from plants and trees, preserved and ready for replanting. Thus, once the forests and other biospheres had been cleansed from the pollutants that had all but destroyed them, work began in laboratories, on board massive science vessels stationed off-world, to regenerate the living tissue based on the genetic information stored in the DNA that had been collected, and eventually creatures that had not been seen for ages, some for hundreds of years, began to emerge once more and were released under controlled circumstances back into the wild. The next step was to install food duplicators to provide sustenance to cater to both human and elfin needs, so as not to jeopardize the slowly increasing growth of plants and wildlife. Of course, any form of hunting was strictly forbidden, and any who broke the laws were severely punished for their crimes. A new constitution was written up, one agreed upon on a global scale as opposed to regional, in order to safeguard the well-being of the fragile biosphere and for the sake of all living beings that called it their home, humanoid and animal alike. And so the foundation was laid down for a new era in the ongoing saga of life on Earth, one that was ruled by wisdom rather than rashness, and a sense of doing what was right rather than taking the expedient route.
If you like our content, please leave a like and subscribe as well.